Don't be afraid of those big identity shifts and really step into your own power, and fulfill that leadership role, and know that you can do it with a sense of compassion, respect, and dignity for your other teammates along the way.
Hello, Profit First entrepreneurs and thought leaders. I'm so excited. Our guest today is Kirsten Beske. Now, Kirsten is the founder of the A Pro Positive LLC and also the Kirsten Beske Coaching. And background, Kirsten is a Harvard education experienced psychotherapist and mindset coach specializing in helping women master their own internal world to achieve success. Um, and what she does is she really helps people who are interested in personal growth as well as advanced mindset concepts who wants to keep stretching that boundary of personal mastery for greater impact in the world. So she teaches professionals and entrepreneurs how to break through invisible in their barriers to attain more clarity, impact, and ease in life as well as in business. Now, her background is she was a former litigation attorney, but pivoted into the mid career to align with her higher level purpose and skill set. And so she has been spent the last decade as a clinical psychotherapist, and now she is a mindset coach who is serving others to expand, transform, and attain their full limitless potential. So please join me in welcoming Kirsten Beske to our platform. Hey, Kirsten, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk about this subject today. And we're going to talk about leadership, right? And particular leadership and making that call, and leadership in terms of really being stepping out to make that call, really about mastering your own internal mindset for that so that you can really challenge. Because you guys know you're scaling businesses, you're no longer a party of one. And a lot of times we have to make that call. And I love Kirsten's viewpoint on that, how it has to come, you have to lead from the inside to the out. So, Kirsten, thank you for joining us today and talking about really helping us make the call, right, in leadership.
I am excited to talk about it. It's definitely something that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, because so many of us come into this field thinking you have something you want to share with the world, and then you learn, oh, this requires team, and then this requires some management of team, and so that can really, if your inner compass isn't fully set and you're not in alignment, that can really start to leak out in how you're managing your team, and how you're making those harder calls when it comes to making those decisions. But is this the right person for this thing, or is this someone that needs to go their own way? And also then having that kind of inner confidence that even though you have to do something that you may view as quite unpleasant, you're confident enough and compassionate enough that you can execute that and not really get yourself all twisted up inside, and make that call because you know it's the right thing to do to move your company forward.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've seen time and time again where, entrepreneurs know the right thing to do, right? And they know that they have someone on the wrong seat on the bus, but they're just not willing to make that call, right? They're not willing to challenge the person, remove the person if necessary. And so it allows it to fester, which at the end of the day just breaks down the team as well as the entrepreneur, right? Because you'll always have that, I'm gonna call it irking feeling when you're around that, and the situation is not improving. So, Kirsten, tell me about what stops leaders from making the call at the end of the day.
Well, there's several factors that come into play, and so one of them is is self doubt, and so the doubt comes in because often there's not a procedure in place, like standard operating procedure, right? Where you have actually addressed some of these issues along the way. So then what happens is a pattern gets established, and you don't address it at point one, and you don't address it at point two, and then it becomes point five, and you're done, but you haven't had any process with the person, any communication. A lot of us are conflict avoidant, and we think if we express something that is difficult, we just rather avoid it, so we keep avoiding it until it builds up to this place where we have to take action. But we can doubt, like, did I do everything I was supposed to do on my end before I got to this point? And so, this is where I draw a little bit on my my history as an attorney, because so many times these type of problems would arise in litigation, which obviously we all want to avoid, because there wasn't kind of a system in place to give back that feedback to an employee or a team member, so that you wouldn't end up surprising them, right, when it was time to part ways. So the self-doubt part can come if you are just wondering, like, do I have my system set up right? So just like the profit first system is a really clear system that shows you where to put your money so you can keep track of it, having a process in place to deal with team and deal with any underperformance or any other issues that come up ahead of time is going to really make you feel that much more confident when it comes down to that last time where you just know that it's really the right time. You'll know, oh, well, I went through that procedure. I talked to that person, 4 months ago and 3 months ago and 2 months ago. Now I know it's time. So having that hard communication up front is going to give you more confidence when it comes time to actually make that hard call. But in order to have those conversations, you need to be really clear within you. What's your motivation, right? Are you just irritated because you're having a bad day? Or do you know, wait, my mission statement for my company is really not being met by this issue, right? And so I can feel comfortable addressing it from that standpoint rather than just, boy, am I just being a little pissy today, or something like that. You want to be clear that each point along the way that what you're trying to do is run this company. You know your mission, you know the direction and the impact you want to make. And so you're addressing this person's behavior, say, or performance from that standpoint, not just your personal irritability factor. And that will help you feel better about it because you'll be clear. Clarity is really important.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely with that. I know, as a leader, one of the things that we struggle with is every decision we make affects somebody else, right? And, you're responsible for, their livelihood in some ways because, these employees support their families and, to have to release someone or even discipline them, it's, the longer term impact is it's constantly a weight on that. And you're right, having that clarity at the end of the day, about, this is not about me, this is about systems and processes. And if you break the process, there's a consequence that definitely helps with that. And I know one of the things that I've experienced as well as other entrepreneurs have confessed and told me is there's always that self-doubt too, like maybe it's just me, am I being too hard on this person, and things like that. So how do you really start to, I guess, tackle that and get resolution on that item?
Yeah, well, so that's a great question. So in addition to that, making sure no one's ever, my personal philosophy is no one should ever be surprised that they're being let go. So if you view it through that lens, then what are the steps you need to take? And so that self-doubt part, that comes from that identity shift that you had to make from being, a solopreneur to a team leading entrepreneur slash CEO, right? So CEOs have to be able to make those hard calls. And so being clear that your identity has shifted, you're no longer, while you may want to be one of the guys, right? As we say, even one of the gals, right? You are in fact the leader. And unfortunately, leadership is inherently lonely. And I think a lot of us push back against that reality because we really value our team and we want the community. And yet, when you think about what true leadership is, it is having that courage and confidence to make those unpopular decisions. And so it can become a little lonely because you are in fact the top of the pyramid. You are not part of the bottom, or even if you have a really collaborative environment. And obviously, there's different models of businesses, but if you are using kind of the traditional CEO, this is my business and I am ultimately responsible for it, you have to make that identity shift as from, hey, we're all in this together, to, hey, we're all in this together and I have that extra obligation and responsibility to be steering the ship, and I have to steer it away from the storms and into the, clear water. And you all are going to help me as much as you can. And hopefully that we're all going to get along. But in the end, I am the one responsible. And so a lot of people who have not had leadership roles to have past experience with find that shift really difficult. And so part of the mindset work that we can do around that, and I do with my clients, is that you have to really start visioning yourself in that type of role. And what does that look like? Do you have any role models or other people who you've seen govern? I like the word govern, even though, how do you kind of roll out the rules and regulations and put the mission forward? And so being the captain of the ship, what does that look like for you? And do that in calm times, so that when the seas get rough and you still need to execute, you've got kind of that foundation of like, this is what being a leader to me looks like. And I'm comfortable with this because I've been practicing it in these calm times, and I've been visioning it during, and now I'm going to execute it even in this rough sea. I'm going to stick with the plan and do what I know needs to be done, even if it's hard.
I love
So,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because, as entrepreneurs, a lot of times we grow out of our circles, right? And we're in a position where none of our peers have traditionally have been in before, right? And we may not have been the direct report of a CEO to actually experience, how they make decisions, or a lot of times they may not even tell us, right? Like what factors they're weighing and making a decision. So there is not necessarily those steps to really follow from behind to mimic on that. How do you suggest that we get clarity on our own position and what leadership looks like when there are no previous examples?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because leadership can take so many different forms. And we have kind of the traditional, I'll call it male, top-down management system, where if you think of kind of like maybe even the football team, right? The coach makes the call and everyone's supposed to has their role and they're supposed to execute, and it's not a collaborative experience. And then we have what has been labeled more traditionally, more feminine, female management model, where you're working a little bit more collaboratively with everyone and really valuing the input of everyone. And yet you can't forget that you, in fact, still are the leader of the group. And so it's interesting because without knowing, you have to actually decide for yourself, in your life, maybe even in your home growing up, in your, as we call it, the family of origin, what did leadership look like there? And did it work for you? Is that how you want to see things? And is it comfortable for you to do top-down leadership? Is that work for you, or are you more comfortable being more collaborative? And is that just feel better for you? And can you make it work? And so the studies out there show that employees who are more engaged and have more responsibility and really have that sense of contributing are more loyal and last longer, and really dedicate themselves to their job more than people who are just told what to do and just have to do it. So there is some evidence out there that a more collaborative style can be more effective. So I think you get to play around, right? If you really don't know your own style, try a day where you feel more, I call it dictatorial, right? Where you feel more like you're really just top down managing, and then try a little more collaborative. And one of the skills that are so important for leaders to have is the ability to listen, right? To ask good questions, and hear the feedback from the person that you're managing, so that you can really get the raw data you need, right? Otherwise, you're making decisions in a vacuum. So so the ability to have that communication and listen, and then take that all into account and see if that feels good. Does that feel better, or do you prefer just more straight down, just do what I tell you and we're going to be fine? And everyone's different, what their kind of vision of themselves are, but always asking yourself, is this model of service to me, is it of service to my business, and does it move us closer to our mission, right? And so if you've got a lot of employee turnover, or you're just not getting the right people in the right place, that's a good time to ask yourself, okay, so is what, how, if anything, am I contributing to this turnover? And are there some stylistic changes I can make that may make it easier for me to effectively manage people? And frankly, usually the people you're managing are the ones that are going to be able to give you the good feedback if you give them the space, if you have the courage to let them give you feedback and not take it too personally. You can use that as data and shift your style to work for everyone better.
I like that. So giving yourself permission really to be able to experiment with different styles to find which one is unique to you. And also just weighing those two options, like you said, there's the top-down approach and the collaborative style. And it's interesting how, one is deemed more of a male style, one is a more of a female style, and how one style gets more people involved. But, as I was told, I remember when I was, in my early part of my career, you can delegate the work, but not the responsibility. At some point, you do have to keep that. You have, at the end of the day, may have to make that call. But definitely great advice on that. Really just experimenting on styles and giving yourself permission to do that. That is amazing and really good thoughts on that. What else holds leaders back from really being able to really just be effective?
Well, I do run across a lot of, I would call it imposter syndrome. I don't know if any of your listeners have experienced this, but that's kind of that feeling that here I am, I'm running this company and doing this thing, and secretly nobody understands. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not even, don't even feel qualified for this at all. And so, in cases of imposter syndrome, that's some of the deeper work that we can do that I do with my clients together to work through really owning the accomplishments that you have in your past and taking credit for them at a deep level that you can feel in your body, to help build up that inner confidence that you in fact are this person. And so part of the problem that especially a lot of women that because I work primarily with women, not exclusively, is that they have for some reason women seem to be socialized to not take credit for their contributions along the way, and they're very willing to share credit. They're willing to give credit where credit's due elsewhere, but they forget to also direct it inward and take responsibility for themselves. So there's that piece where if you don't internally validate yourself each little step along the way, you'll find yourself at the top of a ladder feeling like you don't even know how you got there. And so there's a little backtracking that needs to get done to build you up to the place you actually are. And that's keeping in mind that every time we make a big leap forward, we leap forward in faith, and we may, for a short period of time, feel that imposter syndrome. And that's okay as long as we come out of it, right? As long as we live into it and start to feel more comfortable. It's only when it stays longer than it should that it really starts to impede things, because then you don't have, that means your inner moral compass, your values, your big why, your mission statement for your company aren't solid enough that you can own the success. So we just, sometimes need to back it up and kind of remind you, and that you that's in there wondering if you're really qualified, that you are, you've got the foundation, you've got the skills, and now you're going to execute and live into it.
I love that. So just giving yourself validation along the way, and going ahead and accepting your own accomplishments, so that by the time as you rise, you'll have the confidence to do that. So Kirsten, do you feel that this imposter syndrome with women, I always love to say, as the generations go by, do you think that that's going away? Do you think we're overcoming that societal expectation, or do you think that's something that the message is still out there that about women that creates that imposter syndrome?
Well, I I wish I could say that it's going away, and I think incrementally it is going away. But I think because of I would say social media, and what we don't see on we see more and more role models in like on shows on TV, right? Like Madam Vice President, right? And then we have Kamala. As our visual experience of women in positions of power increases, it helps people lean into those roles because they've had the chance to actually imagine it in their mind. I'm hopeful that the younger women coming up today are really going to have less and less of that imposter syndrome. Where the women have come before us, they have definitely had to invent their own place in the world, and invent kind of like, what does this look like? And they didn't have a roadmap. I remember when I was practicing law, there was no senior women attorneys that I could look to as a role model, because they all either stopped practicing or something by then, because I was a litigator, so I was trying cases in court, and you had that, I don't know, that balance between being too aggressive and too nice, right? And how do you be an effective woman attorney? This was, back a while ago. But so now we have more and more role models of what it can look like to be an effective um, person who can execute and take leadership and not fall off the edge of dismissing them into like the B category, right? Like, oh, they're not a human being, they're just mean. And so I do hope that our younger women coming up through the ranks are having more and more good role models that they can follow.
Yeah, I think that'll be very interesting because I agree. I think we probably grew up near the same era, and there weren't a lot of examples of professional women, right? It was, pretty much it was, just more women for entertainers, but really no professional women, especially in the higher echelon. So, hopefully, as these decades change, our girls will have a different impression of themselves as they rise through the ranks. Definitely.
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out to my own mother who, she's 80 now,
Oh,
and she was the first mayor of our town when I was growing up, and she ran her own civil engineering company for over 25 years. And so she was, for me, a role model of a woman that did step into these positions of power. But I do know that she was the only woman in the room for decades, right? Only now she mentors younger women to come along, and there's more women in the room. But it's just interesting it's wonderful to have her out there as a pioneer and role model. And yet, as you know from the numbers, we still need to keep getting a few more of us women folk up into those upper echelons so that we can, shift things even more.
oh yeah, what luck you got. I mean, that's like a real head start there, having your mom be the mayor. Kirsten can go whatever ice cream she wants when she goes into the ice cream shop.
Right, right.
Don't get the mayor's daughter upset. You might get a ticket.
I should take more advantage of that, clearly.
My mom was a stay-at-home mom, so
Right. Well, and and that's that visioning, right? So like we were talking about, like where do you find your role models? And I think that a stay-at-home mom's a fabulous role model also for that, that maybe phase of life that people go through. I definitely stepped back in my career when I was raising my kids for a while, and that's okay too, right? So it's great to have role models for all kinds of things. But when we're talking about entrepreneurship and business, my mother is my go-to business advisor still, so that's nice.
One of the things that I hear entrepreneurs complain about, and this is probably men and women combined, is just that delegation, right? And I see it more actually in the women entrepreneurs. It doesn't seem it seems like my male entrepreneurs are okay with like delegating to the personal assistant. But like the female entrepreneurs, there's a almost a guilt in terms of like passing off responsibilities, right? And it's so many times like I'll see them, they'll even be doing their own bookkeeping, and I'm like, why are you doing that? You know what I mean? Delegate that. Why do women struggle with delegation, and how do we help ourselves overcome that?
I love that question. Um, yeah, in my experience, the with women, often the personal relationship between you as the leader and the person that you're delegating to um, has to be stepped into with a high degree of respect. And I think it's if you step into a delegating role with extreme respect for the dignity of the person that you're working with, you are not going to feel that guilt. If you step into the role of delegating and you think of it as a less than, then the guilt's going to come up. This is just as my the psychotherapist background would analyze, because I know that some people, when they're delegating, they have that kind of they don't they I'm not saying you or anyone who doubts themselves, but we can think, oh, I'm giving them something that's not worthy of my time. So if you think of it instead of zones of excellence, and working with the person's strengths, if you have the right person in the right role and you're using their strengths, then you can kind of be giving the work with that sense of respect, and also kind of acknowledgement that their zones of excellence are maybe actually things that aren't your zone of excellence, or shouldn't be now based on the role that you're in. And so that can shift energetically the act of delegating into something that's much more respectful, and nicer for both parties. Does that make sense? And
It
then
absolutely makes sense. I think
yeah.
that's a really great way of looking at it. I haven't heard that before about looking at it in terms of zone of excellence. That person that you brought in for that position, one of the number one rules entrepreneurs, right, is we bring people in that are going to be in their zone of genius, right? And so if that's their zone of genius, if it happens to be a personal assistant, her zone of genius is to serve in that capacity, then there shouldn't be a guilt that's associated with passing down that task, to get that extra help. So that
Yeah.
absolutely makes sense, Kirsten.
Yeah, and I do know, I have had some experience with some assistants, and they also love that feeling of helping, right? They love to be of service too. So you're really giving them that gift of letting them be of service to you by letting them have that degree of control and help back. So that's just one nice way to look at it that makes it a lot easier, and also I find it very effective because it helps engender loyalty, and it does help have a good personal relationship as well, because the energy is right, it's aligned energy.
Definitely. That is absolutely amazing. So, as we close out today, I love to ask our guests, if there was one piece of advice or a golden nugget, can be personal or business, that you could leave our entrepreneurs with today, what would that piece of advice be?
Well, let's see. In light of the conversation, I would say, don't be afraid of those big identity shifts, and really step into your own power, and fulfill that leadership role, and know that you can do it with a sense of compassion, respect, and dignity for your other teammates along the way. And that way, you're going to be really solid as long as you keep in mind your mission and values, and have your inner compass solid. So don't be afraid to evolve right into that role.
I love that. That is great advice. And how can we find you, to work with you, to grow more of our mindset so that we can step into these types of roles, Kirsten?
Well, thanks. I do have a website. It's www.apropositive.com. And I also run a Facebook group called Becoming Boundless, where I share my mindset tips and tools. So, and you can email me at Kirsten@apropositive.com, and I'd be happy to get back to you.
Thank you. And I am going to go ahead and put Kirsten's contact information in our show notes so that you'll be able to click on her site to get in contact with her or join her Facebook group. Thank you, Kirsten, so much for joining us today and just sharing your wisdom so generously.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.